My full name is Shirley Madeline Morrison. I have lived here my entire 86 years.
My name is Richard Eldridge. I've lived here for most of my life, and actually I was born just back the road about 3 houses on a farm.
Okay, my name is Nancy Fitch, and I've been living in Chester Basin for all of my life, which is 75 years.
My name is Glenda Redden, and I was an Oxner. We moved down here full-time in 1998. However, I've been coming here all my life because it's my paternal home.
My full name is Ella Mae Mary Hendiger, and I lived in Chester Basin since 1958.
Living here as a child was, well, it was quite different than what it is today. Our school was just over the road here, so we were able to jump out of bed and run to school, come home for lunch.
Well, I had a great place to play. I had a 50-acre playground with a swimming pool at the river, and in the winters we didn't have, as children, we didn't have too much to do. Bring the wood in and shovel snow. But in the summer, we had the farm to look after. We had weeding to do and cultivating, mowing.
Pick berries in the summer, swimming in the summer, coasting in the winter. Our fun was limited. We didn't sit in the house very long because we didn't have television.
After school, there was 2 little ponds over here, and we'd hit those. And they're about the size of this living room, and we learned to skate well because you couldn't fall down. There was too many kids. Mostly no particular teams, just whoever came went on one side or the other, and we just had a great time. So it was a great place to grow up, really.
I taught Sunday school at one of the neighbors' house, about a mile and a half from where I lived. And I had a guitar, played the guitar, went to church a lot with my grandparents in horse and wagon.
Life was very simple in those days. Didn't cost much to live, It was wonderful.
Of course, one of the money makers with kids was picking blueberries, and that was one of our money makers, that we would raise enough money to buy our school supplies and go back to school. Well, it was a small community, but we had our school and we had our churches, and we were blessed to have one of the better schools around. When it was built, it was quite modern. It had a chemistry lab and 3 classrooms and what we call a rough room where we could play games and do projects and have a great time. We had a little ball field in behind where we could play ball at recess, dinner hours, and after school. And
in our school, we started at primary, of course, and grade 10 was the highest grade. Then, if you wanted more education, you would go to the Cross. That was called Charing Cross, by the way. And but you'd have to walk there because there was no transportation, and that was about 4 miles.
Well, they only went to grade 10 because the teachers, most of them couldn't teach grade 11 at that time, and you had to go to Lunenburg if you wanted to take your grade 12.
At one time, there was a lot of men came here to mines, and they came mostly from northern Nova Scotia because they had grown up with mines, and so when the gold mines opened, a lot of them came from Stellarton, Spring Hill, and those areas, and they would board in various places. And my mom kept probably 2 or 3 at one time, and they did shift work, and they would come and go, and there was a truck that used to bring them to the homes where they boarded. And one interesting note, on our farm we had very nice fields. If a miner was on shift work in the night, he might sneak a little dynamite home, and during the day he would blow the rocks in the field. So we had nice farmland on our farm because thanks to the miners who used to like to bore holes in rocks and blow them to pieces. Of course, when you were a farmer, you had to get into Christmas trees at one time in the early days, and any farm and kept cattle and supported the family. And my mom was a seamstress, so there was 2 incomes. When one would be a little slack, and Mom did her sewing, and she did quite well at that. And she was very, very fussy and did great work.
Actually, there was more. They had a sawmill in Chester Basin. They had the stores, and they had the cooperage. Moyle Oxner had a cooperage. Bob Henniger had a cooperage and sawmill. Actually, they did have more things going on in Chester Basin then than they do now. I guess they were better off then. At that time, there was woodwork and coopers. They mostly made barrels, got their own logs and own wood out, took it to their mill, sawed their staves and heading, and made their own barrels. And apple barrels, mostly, at that time, were possibly 25 cents a piece for all the work they had to do back in the woods, cut the wood, bring it out, take it to the mill, saw it, drag it back again. Made the barrels and sold them for 25 cents a piece.
So the forest was very, very important. And there was two stave mills. The barrel business was very big at that time, back from the 1950s right up until the 1980s. It was extremely important, the fish barrel business, and then before that the apple barrel business back from the turn of the century right on into the 1930s. A lot of the apples that left here to feed the people out west left in our apples in our barrels. 2 barrel mills here in the settlement, Chester Grant, and later a sawmill that still operates today. The people brought their logs to be sawed to those mills either by ox or horse team or floated them in the river. And when the ice melted, they pile them right on the ice, and then when the ice melted, they just float them down the water to the mill. There's little bits and pieces of the mill down here on Millwoods Lake. There's one shaft and one pulley left there. That's all that's left of that one.
Of course, logging was the industry in a lot of places, but in this area, shipbuilding was very important because Lunenburg couldn't build ships fast enough. So they would come down the coast and find a community that would build ships. And Chester Basin did build a lot of beautiful ships. I asked somebody one time what the size of them would be. And we have pictures of them in the harbor, but it's kind of hard to, describe and measure how big they would be. But I think they were, I was told that they were about the size of the Blue Nose. So they were big ships to be built in a small harbor. So.
People moved to the community to work on the boats and whatnot, and there were people in the community that were already working on them.
Puppy was born here, right here in Chester Grant, and lived here all his life. He married a lady from Greenfield, and a Shankle she was. And then they lived here. And at that time, when they were living here, is when we had the New Ross Teamsters would stop over here. In the nights, they'd come as far as from New Ross to here, had to stay in all the houses along here and Seffernsville because they couldn't make the full trip from New Ross to Chester Basin in one day. They had to stop over here, put their horses and oxen up in the barn, which was out here, and then they would stay here overnight, bring their own big food boxes they had, like trunks they had their food in. And I remember my mom saying that she always see them coming because they usually always had moose meat, so they'd always treat her with moose meat. And then the next morning they'd go to the basin, unload their barrels or whatever they had, and then come back here again another night and then go on home the next day. It took 3 days to make the trip.
This community, I often wish I could see back in what it looked like around 1900. I think it must have been an amazing place.
The homes originally were built by shipwrights. When they landed here from the European countries, that was their trades, shipbuilders, so they're built the same way you build a ship. The houses were very basic, very neat, and totally different construction with there's no studding in this house, just solid wall plank, notched in the corners and the centers, and they're 3 inches thick, and the wall here to our right, there's only 4 planks in that from the floor to the ceiling.
Wow.
They're anywhere between 32 to 39 inches wide.
a lot of people who live here don't realize what was here. They see this place today and it's, for the most part, a bedroom community or a retirement community.
The settlement has changed the last probably 20 years. We picked up a lot of people.